Hey guys, what's up? It is Dave the Drummer here. It is 8:30. It is the last Friday of the month. You know what time that is? It is CTV Channel 27 on your Comcast local Santa Cruz, or if you are watching us on the stream, it's communitytv.org, Channel 27. Either way, you're watching The Talking Drum with Dave the Drummer. Glad that you are watching in and tuning in. So, let's get right to it. I don't want to gush too much, but I will say this is one of the interviews I created the show to capture is Rick Walker, legendary performance, artist, musician, friend, comrade, goes by a lot of different monikers, but Rick Walker's story was something that I wanted to have on the show from day one. Rick Walker was one of the gentlemen that I was really stoked to get on the show, so when Rick reached back out to me and said he was more than happy to come on, I had to have him on, so we had him on. We actually had 2 interviews, and we could not use the first one. However, if you are a fan of podcasts, you are in luck. We did save that audio, and that audio is going to go up into a podcast episode of The Talking Drum. So keep an eye out for that. If it's not already out, it should be in the near future. Just make sure that you check out on my be sure to check out on my website, because my website will actually drop the first couple of episodes of the podcast. So keep your eye out for it. Anyways, without further ado, let's get to the first part of that interview with Rick Walker. Rick Walker, take it away. Hey guys, this is Dave the Drummer. We're back over here at East Cliff Brewing. We have my good friend Rick Walker here. Rick is actually the first local friend that I made here in Santa Cruz. And when I made this show, it was fully intended to get Rick into interview with us. And so I'm very, very proud to present Rick Walker.
Thanks a lot.
So, Rick, would you please be so kind as to give the viewers a little background about yourself and a little bit about your career? Or maybe
Sure.
not even a little bit, but please, whatever you feel comfortable, please.
Yeah. I guess I started out, my family were all scientists, but they also had both played music. My dad had led big bands, small big bands in Texas during World War II, and gave it up to become a doctor. My mom had played violin, and anyway, so at the age of 5, I was taking piano lessons, and then I was taking cello lessons, and then I played clarinet for 8 years. And then I went to a youth Methodist camp, and my parents would banish us to this camp every year, and so they could get 2 weeks alone with themselves, right? And so there was a band playing at the bottom of the valley, steep valley in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and they were all dressed in heavy black leather Harley Davidsons, and they were playing note for note covers of Rolling Stones songs. And I was 12 years old, and it was the sexiest thing I'd ever seen in my life. It was the most non-San Jose, non-suburbia, non-youth Methodist camp, and I was like, I have to do this.
Right.
And so I bugged him to get me a drum set, and my dad was like, no, you quit all these instruments, we're not getting you a drum set. So my mom prevailed, and I got a snare drum for Christmas 50 years ago, last Christmas.
Wow.
And I went every single day to my best friend's house for 3 months, 7 days a week, 3 months, every day, walked a mile with my snare drum, and learned how to play Louie Louie and British Invasion stuff, and started the Concave Image, my first band.
Right.
So it started out modestly, and then my parents rented me a drum set about 3 months later when they realized that I had been touched, you know.
Right.
And I've been touched ever since.
That's what they would say.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they would say about, you know, people like us. Is,
Yeah.
you know, he's a little touched. He's a
Yeah,
special
he's
one.
touched.
That one.
Yeah,
you know.
he's special.
Yeah. So after that, you kind of moved on to
Well,
playing. What kind of styles did you wind up getting into?
Basically, what I did was I took 2 lessons from a really burnt-out jazz musician, and he hated his life. He hated rock drumming with a passion. He told me that John Bonham was using double bass drums, and he couldn't teach me how to do that because it was a single bass drum. And then I saw a picture of John Bonham playing a single bass drum,
Right.
realized he'd lied, and then never took another lesson
Right.
for 15, 16 years.
Right.
I was like, ugh, lessons, ugh.
Yeah.
Funny because I've been teaching for 40 years, but So anyway, so I just taught myself, and in those days, you didn't have to be 21 to go see really great music, like at places like Winterland or the Family Dog or the Fillmore. And this was, the summer of love. And so when I was 16, my sister took me to the Fillmore, and then I had a driver's license, and I would borrow the car, and I would just drive. I mean, I learned how to play the drums by watching psychedelic bands in the parks. There was free music in San Jose every single weekend.
Right.
Great bands play. I saw Tower of Power play maybe 12 times. I saw Santana play 6 times before he changed his name from the Carlos Santana Blues Band, playing B.B. King covers to Santana, where he became, So I got to see everyone. I got Justin Airplane and Big Brother and everybody. So I learned how to play by going to these free concerts and driving up to the Fillmore and standing right next to the stage and going, what's he doing? And I didn't know how to read. I just had to, so I was pretty primitive, really, for a good long while.
But I mean, the thing about all that observation is that if you're touched, if you're special like us, then you're not just seeing something, you're like absorbing it, and your brain just really just kind of picks it up. And so it's almost like, if I see you do it, I can do it myself, or I can at least, how did he do it again? Like, yeah, and so I can understand that viewpoint. But did you ever wind up learning how to read?
Well, what happened was that one night when I was at UCSC, and to be quite honest, I went to a dance at Stevenson College because I just wanted to meet girls.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to a dance, right?
I've been to Stevenson a few times.
And there was a band called Hejole Sounds from Ghana playing, and they were playing only in 6/8, which I'd never seen before. They were playing African pop music.
Right.
And I was like gobsmacked. I mean, my jaw was just open, and I stood at the side of the stage for 4 hours going, what is this? It was so cool and funky and exotic. And so I started at playing traditional African dance classes.
Right.
And it was playing those that I realized that hey, there's a grid going on under everything. And if I understand that grid, I can understand how polyrhythms work.
Right.
So I taught myself how to read. And when I taught myself how to read, I learned more in 1 year than I had in the previous 15 years before that.
Right.
So, and then I started taking lessons from master drummers from all over the world.
Right.
And for about 25 years, I was just foaming at the mouth student.
Right.
And so then I became really interested in like really knowing what was going on, and learning how to play very, very sophisticated rhythms, how to incorporate rhythms from all over the world into my trap set drumming.
Right.
But then I started playing hand percussion, djembes and congas, etc., Haitian drums. Then I started playing finger drums, frame drums, and tabla and things like that. So I just really branched out at that time, and then really for a long time, for 25 years, I mostly was a percussionist who did drumming.
Right.
Whereas I had been a drummer before that, and so like it just went like that, my consciousness or whatever, and then I started teaching. So started teaching this system that I came up with that was a holistic approach to rhythm on the planet.
And you've been teaching that kind of the holistic rhythm stuff. You've been teaching that, you said, for about 25 years or something along?
Well, I started the first rhythm intensive. I just went back and looked.
Right.
And I started the first rhythm intensive because I was doing a lot of studio work, and I played with bass players who were really, really good.
Right.
Super good on their instruments. But if they were presented with, say, an African rhythm that they'd never heard, they didn't know how to compose a bass line.
Right.
So I began fascinated by studying bass lines from all over the world and going, how, in each culture, how do they incorporate it? And then I began to see that there were these relationships that were really pretty mathematical.
Yeah.
There were subsets of things, right?
Right.
So I started teaching the bass rhythm intensive.
Right.
I tried to teach bass players how to learn how to play this new world beat music that we were just innovating and starting. And that was 30 years ago.
Now, Rick and I were talking about Peter Gabriel, actually, a little bit before we started recording the interview. And Peter Gabriel is definitely somebody who brought world music to like the forefront of I would say I wouldn't call it pop music, but I would definitely say he brought it out in front as like say for instance like a battering ram, I guess, to get through, because I mean even his pop hits have some polyrhythmic African-based kind of stuff. Shock the Monkey. I mean, if you listen to that, you know, you can't tell me that that doesn't have some kind of influence of the world music. Those African kind of drums that are in there. So I mean, you know, the '80s. That's when like world music's really kind of like everybody wants to get their hands in that pie.
And there were fusions of world music with different kinds of music.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, in the '60s, there was a movement called the Third Wave movement,
Right.
which was largely Indian music with jazz. And then there were bands like Kaleidoscope, David Lindley,
Right.
early stuff that were doing kind of folky stuff that was doing it. But the whole world pop thing,
Right.
pop
Right.
being influenced by it, occurred. And Gabriel was one of the people. Paul Simon was one of the people,
Yes.
and the Police. Absolutely, those three bands were the first people who started really aggressively mixing rhythms from other cultures
Yeah.
in, and we were doing that
Yeah.
from in 1980.
Right.
We had a band, and that's what we were doing, called
Yeah.
Rhythmical. So,
That-
and it was before they called it World Beat, 2 years before, and so it was bubbling up at the time.
Right. That's
Yeah.
tasty.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, every time we talk, I mean, even when we're not being filmed for talking, you always wind up blowing my mind with some new facts. I mean, I still remember the first couple times we would hang out at the Rush and play pool, and he would tell me stories about meeting guys like Chester Thompson, and just blowing my mind because I was becoming a huge Chester Thompson fan at the time. Chester Thompson, of course, played with Genesis, the touring drummer for a very long time.
Yeah.
Became Phil Collins' drummer when he was going out doing solo shows. Got to play with Frank Zappa, and I think he did an album with Heavy Weather, if I remember correctly. Or Weather Report, I'm sorry, not
Yeah,
Heavy
Weather Report, yeah.
And so, I mean, Rick's always blowing my mind with stuff, you know, with all these facts and things, you know. But, yeah, so tell me a little bit about we were talking about African percussion, and you were kind of getting interested in that. That's something that you've been deeply, you know, invested into, and you even said you were a drummer that was doing percussion, and then you became a percussionist that it was a drummer. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on like that?
Well, there are a couple of really simple paradigms in music all over the planet, and I need to name check John Connell, a good friend of mine, who hit me to one of these concepts. He said all over the world you have ethnic folk music where there's one person playing an instrument and singing, and there's a drummer. So the two-person group is like the White Stripes didn't invent it, right? It's a paradigm all over the world. And so what you have is you have rhythm, you have melody, and you have vocals. When you introduce Western music, then you start having harmony as well. So the drum set has deep bass in it. It has a mid-range from the snare drum, and it has hi-hats. And you can power an entire group by never hitting a tom or never hitting a cymbal. You can really play a lot of drumming, and so that's the basis. Everything else sort of adds to it. You know, it's like it's spice, right?
Right.
So what happens is, if you, as an example, if I'm backing a singer-songwriter, I just did this the other night at the Blue Lounge, and played with a singer-songwriter, and if you play a djembe, the touches on the djembe are the hi-hats. The bass sound is the kick drum,
Right.
and the slap sound is a snare.
Right.
And you have that paradigm, even when you hear a really good djembe, or as they say in Senegal, djebe, a really good djebe master.
Right.
They have the boom, you know,
Yeah.
you have that kind of thing. So you find that, you know, if you look at the tabla, it does the same thing. They're bass notes, they're mid-range notes, and high notes. And we're orchestrating the instruments, which
Right.
is why, by the way, a lot of drummers end up being producers, a lot of drummers end up being arrangers, because you're arranging
Right.
multiple instruments at one time. So you can morph it. I can play a darbuka, you know, Middle Eastern darbuka, or I can play a kanjira, which is a frame drum from India,
Right.
or a drum set, or a jebe, or whatever, and it's the same kind of thing. So you can take one instrument its vibe, and you can like move it over. You can play Indian music on a drum set. You can play drum set, you know, on a doumbek, whatever.
Right.
And it's pretty universal because what do? We have low, mid, and high in our range of hearing.
Right.
So when I started backing people like and touring with people like Bob Brosman and Martin Simpson, recording records with them, that's what I was doing. I ended up taking a single flat kick drum, a little teeny snare drum, little teeny hi-hats, and one flat ride cymbal, and then I had a djembe, frame drums, a darbuka, and some percussion, and then some mouth percussion, right?
Right.
And that was just, it was just like a world music kit. It was
Yeah.
like I could go any direction,
Right.
backing them,
Right.
you know, or just playing with a conventional musician,
Right.
you know, using that approach. So to me, the drum set is a percussion instrument.
Right.
And a lot of people delineate drum set and drummers and percussionists, but to me, it's all the same thing. And
Right.
you know, if you use a 5-pound gong mallet and you're hitting a 28-inch gong and you've got to go really, really quickly to get it to swell, and it's 5 pounds, right?
Right.
And you have to have a feather touch.
Right.
Or if you have the skinniest piece of steel and you have to have a feather touch on a triangle.
Right.
Or you have big marching drumsticks, or you have really tinny, skinny jazz sticks.
Right.
To me, because I learned how to do this, like I just can pick up anything and play, because it's just a matter of, hey, you're using something to strike something and you have to change your muscles a little bit to
Right.
do it. So I don't even, like, I think I frustrate my students because there are no matching drumsticks in my studio. It's all, you know, it's like, no, just any two, pick up any two, it's cool.
Yeah.
Go, you know. But
Yeah.
everyone's
Yeah.
likes that, but
Well, I mean, but if they want to get if they want to get the Rick Walker experience, they've got to understand there will be no matching drumsticks at the Rick Walker experience. Could you tell me a
but
little?
can I say one thing about that?
Go for it, please.
Every human being is completely unique, and so no matter who you study with, you cannot sound like them.
True.
So I'm actually completely uninterested in the Rick Walker experience. I don't care about it at all. I'm more like, what tools can we get so that whatever is in you comes out,
Right.
and does it. And I'm really I'm militant about that. It's just getting people to be creative,
Right.
to be really creative. That to me is the goal. And then we can look at what ways to do it. Do we learn about melody and harmony, or do we learn about rhythm, or do we, production or
Yeah.
sound design? It doesn't really, it's all the same to me.
Right.
It's all just, manifesting.
Bringing out the best in somebody,
yeah,
and
creativity.
finding out those tools that they can use and take with them. You
Yeah.
know, because I definitely agree that all percussionists, not just drummers on a whole, but all percussionists, they have a big bag of tools, and so it's basically what you picked up from watching and from listening.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do have people show you exactly what they did to show you a drum pattern so that you could at least play the pattern. But like you said, and it's 100% true, you're never going to play exactly like somebody. We're talking about Chester Thompson. Chester Thompson's job for a long time was to sound like Phil Collins.
Right.
But he was never going to sound exactly like Phil
Yeah.
Collins. But he sounded close enough. And so that was the thing. And he had to work at sounding like Phil Collins. His own natural style was not lent towards that. You as a drummer, you learn to be a chameleon. Very good one. If you're, somebody that cares about what you do as an art form, as a percussionist, you can become a very good chameleon. I've seen it dozens of times. I've done it myself a few times. I'm sure Rick would attest to that.
Yeah.
But so can you tell me a little more about influences? Like, who influenced you?
Well,
Not just trap set percussion, but like percussion
Yeah.
overall on a whole, musically.
yeah, and interestingly enough, in my life, it was always musical artists who influenced me more than drummers per se.
Right.
I've loved drummers. There are many drummers that I do love.
Yes.
But I mean, the Rolling Stones.
Right.
Boom. The Beatles. Boom. Those. The British Invasion. Those are the bands. Matter of fact, I'm thinking about putting together a riff rock band that goes back and does all the British Invasion stuff. Everything that was whatever, that kind of rock and roll, minimal rock and roll.
Right.
I lived, grew up in a lily white, upper middle class suburb in Willow Glen in San Jose.
Right.
And out of 2,000 people, there was one Afro-American in the whole school.
Right.
And I found one of my best buddies who was in the first band with me.
Right.
We both nervously admitted to each other that we loved Motown and we loved Stax and we loved, black R&B. And nobody in our school was into it. Nobody.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a Beatles versus the Beach Boys thing at our
Right.
school, and the Beach Boys won. Okay,
Right.
that's where I came from. It was like the suburbs,
Right.
So I've just loved music of the African diaspora my whole life. All its manifestations, all the way up through hip hop or whatever.
Right.
And then African music. I was a fanatic for reggae for a long time. I was really into African music, really into Middle Eastern music. I played for belly dancers for years and years. And,
Right.
Indian music's wonderful. I played with Debashish Bhattacharya and Deepak Ram and
He was just here not too long ago, wasn't he, Deepak?
yeah, I do believe, but I didn't get to see him this time.
No.
It was
But
sad.
that kind of gets to be a little hard. I heard in certain times it's harder to get tickets than others, or just
Yeah.
the timing because
Yeah, he's wonderful. Deepak
Yeah.
Ram's wonderful.
Awesome.
And
Okay.
Debashish Bhattacharya is the heaviest musician I've ever played with my whole life, and I played with a lot of acknowledged master musicians in my life. And if you don't know Debashish Bhattacharya, go check him out.
Have you had a chance to play with Mr. Badish in town? I believe he has a store.
Batish?
Yeah,
Ashwin?
Batish, yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've passed by his place a dozen amount of times off of Mission Street, and had always wondered. And then I saw his son is a percussionist as well.
Oh,
and
his
they both are
son.
like So I would just, I've seen them mentioned dozens and dozens of times in town, different functions and stuff, and it'd be cool to actually get to meet those guys. I'm sure it will at some point.
Well, Keshav, Ashwin's son,
Yes.
is a really, really good drum set player. He's a really good tabla player, and he plays sitar really well.
Right.
And he's really young.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be one of the world's great musicians as he grows up. Ashwin's wonderful as well and plays tabla and sitar, and he's also been he was a big world fusion force. He had records out in the 80s that
Right.
were fusions and I played with him a few times.
And now he's here in Santa Cruz.
He always has been, yeah.
Oh, was he always based out of Santa
Yeah,
Cruz?
Ashwin has
Wow.
been here. Yeah, he had an Indian restaurant on Mission Street for a long time.
That was
that place.
That was a restaurant before.
No, I used to go eat Indian food and watch Ashwin. He would just come out and play.
Oh.
You'd be eating your, whatever tikka masala, and Ashwin would just come out and play for free.
Right.
For anyone who was there, it was pretty magical.
Guys, we're going to come back for a second part of the interview with Rick. We're going to talk a little bit more. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back with part 2. Rick, thank you so much for coming on and doing that interview with us. Really appreciate you giving us the time. Again, this is only part 1 of a 2-part interview that we've done with Rick, and so we're looking forward to next month, the last Friday of that month, 8:30 p.m. Friday nights. We hope that you're going to join us here for the second part of the interview with looping master and jazz drumming great Rick Walker. This is Dave the Drummer saying please be sure to subscribe to the Dave the Drummer Facebook artist page. Be sure to subscribe to the official YouTube channel, be able to check out all the individual interviews of the Talking Drum. They're actually a little different than what we have on the Talking Drum TV here, so you want to check those out. Be sure to also check out all what I'm working on at Bandcamp. Check out what I've got going on SoundCloud.com, and then be sure to check out all my social media links, the Facebook. We want to also all my social media links: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They're all going to be linked at the bottom, so be sure to come and find me and see what I'm up to then, okay? So, until then, Blue Justice!